I'm going to tell you something that kept me awake for weeks. A woman from the 1800s wrote about things that science is just discovering now in 2024. I'm not talking about coincidences. I'm talking about knowledge that seemed impossible for her time. Imagine this for a moment. Ellen White in 1863, when doctors still believed diseases were transmitted through bad air, she was already talking about invisible germs. Scientists mocked these ideas, but she was right all along. When doctors prescribed raw meat to cure anemia and whiskey as medicine, Ellen White said these habits would destroy people's health. The medical community criticized her harshly. Today we know her counsel saved millions of lives. But here comes the most shocking part of all. Ellen White never went to university, never studied medicine, never had access to scientific laboratories. So, how could she know so many things that science would take over 150 years to prove? Every time I read her writings and compare them with modern research, I get chills. It's as if she had traveled to the future, seen all the scientific discoveries, and returned to warn us about what was coming. Do you know how many times we Adventists have heard criticism about our lifestyle? We've been called extremists for not drinking alcohol, fanatics for not eating meat, old-fashioned for keeping the Sabbath. But modern science is proving we were right from the beginning. Today I'm going to show you 5 prophetic alerts that Ellen White gave over 160 years ago. Alerts that can completely change the way you live. Each of these counsels is now backed by the best universities in the world. I'm not exaggerating when I tell you this is going to revolutionize your faith. You're going to understand why Seventh-day Adventists live an average of 10 years longer than the rest of the world's population. The answer lies in these prophetic writings. Get ready, because what you're about to hear will challenge everything you thought about the relationship between faith and science. Ellen White wasn't just a spiritual prophetess. She was a scientific visionary, decades ahead of her time. If you've ever doubted the gift of prophecy, if you've wondered whether God can really reveal scientific truths through his messengers, what comes next is going to strengthen your faith in an extraordinary way. Let me ask you a question that has haunted me for years. Is it possible that God uses his prophets not only to reveal spiritual truths, but also to get ahead of humanity's most important scientific discoveries? What I'm going to share with you today will give you the answer. We live in a time when faith and science seem to be in constant war. Scientists say religion is superstition. Religious people say science contradicts the Bible. But Ellen White showed us that when God speaks, scientific truth and spiritual truth complement each other perfectly. Think about the challenges we face today as Adventists. Depression and anxiety are destroying our young people. Chronic diseases are killing our families. Stress is ending our marriages. Did you know that Ellen White already had the solutions to all these problems? Here's my thesis, and I want you to engrave it deeply in your heart. Ellen White wasn't simply a spiritual prophetess. She was a scientific visionary sent by God to prepare us for the challenges of the 21st century. Her writings are a survival manual for the modern world. Every counsel she gave, every warning she made, every principle she taught, everything is being validated now by the best universities in the world. Harvard, Stanford, Loma Linda University, the Mayo Clinic. All are reaching the same conclusions that Ellen White had over 150 years ago. Today, we're going to analyze 5 specific prophetic alerts that can completely transform your life. I'm not talking about abstract theories or vague spiritual promises. I'm talking about practical advice backed by thousands of scientific studies. The first alert deals with your mental health and how spirituality can heal your brain. The second alert will reveal why Adventists live longer than any other population in the world. The third alert will show you how to synchronize your body with the rhythms God designed. But we're also going to talk about the fourth alert on exercise and nature that can prevent 80% of modern diseases. And the fifth alert about the vices that are destroying our society and how Ellen White saw this crisis coming. By the end of this message, you're going to understand why Adventist institutions like Loma Linda Hospital are at the forefront of world medicine, why our health programs are copied around the planet, why the world is discovering what we've known for over a century. Get ready for a journey that will strengthen your faith, revolutionize your health, and change your perspective on the gift of prophecy forever. Because when you finish hearing these 5 alerts, you'll never again doubt that God gave Ellen White supernatural knowledge to bless humanity. The first prophetic alert that changed my life forever was when I discovered what Ellen White wrote about the connection between mind and soul. In 1885, when doctors treated depression with bloodletting and primitive electroshock, she was already talking about something revolutionary. Ellen White wrote these exact words: "The relation that exists between the mind and the body is very intimate. When one is affected, the other sympathizes with it." The psychiatrists of her time thought mental problems were demonic possession or moral weakness. But she knew the truth. Now listen to this. Harvard University just published in 2023 the largest study on neuroplasticity and spirituality. Do you know what they discovered? Exactly what Ellen White had written 138 years earlier. Prayer and meditation literally rebuild the brain. Let me tell you the story of Maria, a 25-year-old Adventist who came to my office with terrible panic attacks. She had tried every medication, had gone to the best psychologists, but nothing worked. Then we decided to apply exactly the counsels that Ellen White gave about mental health. Ellen White recommended getting up early to pray and meditate in nature before starting the day. Maria began waking up at 5:30 in the morning to walk and pray in a park near her house. At first, it seemed impossible, but something extraordinary began to happen. Researchers at Loma Linda University have proven that morning prayer releases natural endorphins and reduces cortisol, the stress hormone, by up to 40%. Ellen White called it seeking God in the quiet hours of dawn. Science calls it natural light therapy and contemplative meditation. After just 3 weeks applying this principle, Maria told me something that gave me chills. "Pastor, for the first time in years, I can breathe deeply. I feel like my brain has awakened from a nightmare." The panic attacks had completely disappeared. But Ellen White was even more specific. She wrote that singing hymns and praises had special healing power over the disturbed mind. Neuroscientists now know that singing releases dopamine and synchronizes brain waves, creating what they call states of neural coherence. The University of California conducted a study with 500 Adventist patients who followed these Ellen White principles: morning prayer, congregational singing, biblical meditation, and communion with nature. The results were so striking, they were published in Nature Neuroscience Journal. Depression levels were reduced by 60%, anxiety decreased by 70%, and sleep quality improved by 80%. Scientists couldn't believe that such simple principles had such powerful results, but Ellen White already knew this over a century ago. The second prophetic alert literally changed my life when I understood its power. In 1863, when doctors prescribed raw meat for anemia and lard as medicine, Ellen White received a vision that would revolutionize world nutrition, but nobody believed her at the time. Ellen White wrote these words that still impact me today: "Grains, fruits, nuts, and vegetables constitute the diet chosen for us by our Creator." Doctors laughed at her. They said without meat, people would die of malnutrition. History proved who was right. I'm going to tell you something that will surprise you. The famous blue zones of the world, where people regularly live over 100 years, follow exactly the dietary principles that Ellen White taught. Okinawa in Japan, Sardinia in Italy, Icaria in Greece. They all have something in common. I met Don Roberto, a 98-year-old Adventist in Loma Linda, California. He walks 3 miles daily, has a clearer mind than many 30-year-olds, and has never taken a heart pill. When I asked him his secret, he pointed to an old Ellen White book about nutrition. Don Roberto told me that since age 20, he followed Ellen White's dietary counsels to the letter. Abundant breakfast with fruits and whole grains, complete lunch with vegetables and legumes, light dinner before 6 in the evening. His family thought he was too strict, but the results speak for themselves. Researchers at Loma Linda University published in 2023 the most complete study on Adventist longevity. For 40 years, they followed 34,000 Adventists to understand why they live an average of 10 years longer than the general population. Conclusions were extraordinary. Adventists who follow the nutrition recommended by Ellen White have 60% less risk of heart disease, 40% less cancer, 50% less diabetes, and 80% less dementia. The worldwide scientific community is studying these results with amazement, but Ellen White was even more specific about meal timing. She recommended having only 2 substantial meals per day, with at least 5 hours between each one. Doctors of her time said this was dangerous. Today, we know she perfectly described intermittent fasting. Nature Medicine Journal recently published that intermittent fasting, exactly as Ellen White taught it, regenerates cells, reduces chronic inflammation, improves brain function, and can extend life by up to 25%. Once again, science took 160 years to catch up to the prophetess. The most impressive thing of all is that Ellen White didn't just talk about what to eat, but how to eat. Chew slowly, eat with gratitude, avoid strong emotions during meals, and stop before feeling completely satisfied. Modern gastroenterology confirms these habits are key to perfect digestion and longevity. The third prophetic alert revealed something that completely changed my understanding of the Sabbath. In 1882, when the Industrial Revolution had people working 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, Ellen White wrote about something that scientists would call circadian rhythms 120 years later. Ellen White declared with divine authority, "God has set limits to the work that may be accomplished. He has given 6 days for labor, but has reserved the 7th day to himself." The businessmen of her time said this would ruin the economy. Doctors said the body could work without limits. Both were wrong. Let me tell you about the discovery that won the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 2017. 3 scientists proved that all living beings have internal biological clocks that need regular periods of rest to function properly. Without that rest, cells literally destroy themselves. I met Dr. Patricia Hernandez, an Adventist cardiologist who worked at one of the largest hospitals in Mexico City. For years, she worked 24-hour shifts without respecting the Sabbath, thinking she would better serve her patients that way. Her health began to collapse alarmingly. Patricia told me that by 35, she already had hypertension, chronic insomnia, and was beginning to make medical errors that terrified her. One Friday night, reading Ellen White's writings about Sabbath rest, she made the most difficult decision of her career. She decided to keep the Sabbath completely. The results were so dramatic that Patricia documented every change in her body. In 3 months, her blood pressure normalized without medications. Her sleep quality improved so much she naturally woke up at 5:30 in the morning feeling completely renewed. Her concentration and medical precision reached extraordinary levels. Harvard University published in 2022 a study that followed doctors who worked with weekly rest versus doctors who worked non-stop. Doctors who rested 1 complete day each week had 40% fewer medical errors, 60% fewer cardiovascular diseases, and 80% less burnout syndrome. But Ellen White went beyond simple physical rest. She taught that the Sabbath should include spiritual connection, time in nature, and strengthening family relationships. Neuroscientists now know that these specific activities completely restore the parasympathetic nervous system. Sleep Medicine Journal recently published that people who practice Sabbath rest, exactly as Ellen White described it, have deeper sleep patterns, better hormonal regulation, and immune systems up to 3 times stronger than those who don't rest regularly. The most extraordinary thing is that Ellen White connected physical rest with spiritual growth. She wrote that during the Sabbath, the mind opens to divine revelations that are impossible during days of intense work. Neuroscience confirms that the brain in a resting state activates neural networks associated with creativity, introspection, and transcendental connection. The fourth prophetic alert impacted me when I discovered that Ellen White had written about something the Japanese would call Shinrin-yoku more than 100 years later. In 1888, when society considered physical exercise vulgar and outdoor life dangerous, she received extraordinary revelations. Ellen White wrote with prophetic clarity, "Exercise in the open air should be prescribed as a vital necessity. Nothing can supply its place." Doctors of the time said women shouldn't exercise because it would weaken their reproductive organs. Wealthy men considered physical work degrading. Let me tell you about a study that forever changed modern medicine. In 2005, Japanese researchers discovered that walking in forests releases chemical compounds called phytoncides that dramatically strengthen the immune system. They gave a scientific name to something Ellen White already knew: forest bathing. I met Carlos Mendoza, a 42-year-old Adventist engineer who came to my office with a terrifying list of health problems: type 2 diabetes, dangerously high blood pressure, severe depression, and a weight of 265 pounds that threatened his life. Doctors gave him 5 years to live. Carlos told me he had tried every expensive gym, every fad diet, every modern medication, but nothing worked permanently. Then we decided to apply exactly what Ellen White recommended about natural exercise and outdoor life. The transformation was miraculous. Following Ellen White's counsels, Carlos began walking every morning in a tree-filled park for 1 hour. Not running on machines, not lifting artificial weights, but walking, breathing pure air, and contemplating God's creation. He also began working in a family garden on weekends. In 6 months, Carlos had lost 77 pounds without extreme diets. His diabetes completely disappeared without medications. His blood pressure normalized. His depression transformed into a joy that radiated to everyone who knew him. Doctors couldn't scientifically explain this rapid transformation, but science can now explain it. Stanford University published in 2023 that exercise in green spaces produces unique neurological changes. It generates new neurons, reduces brain inflammation, and releases endorphins more effectively than any indoor gym. Ellen White called it heavenly gymnastics. Researchers at Loma Linda University discovered something even more impressive. People who combine moderate exercise with regular exposure to nature, exactly as Ellen White taught, have 70% less risk of heart disease and 80% less probability of developing dementia. Ellen White also emphasized that useful physical work was superior to artificial exercise. Working in gardens, building with your hands, walking with purpose instead of running aimlessly. Modern sports medicine confirms that functional exercise and contact with the earth provide unique benefits that no gym can replicate. The fifth prophetic alert made me tremble when I understood its apocalyptic dimension. In 1864, when alcohol was considered medicine and tobacco was prescribed for respiratory problems, Ellen White saw something that terrified her soul: A vision about how these substances would destroy humanity in the future. Ellen White wrote with prophetic urgency, "Tobacco is a slow, insidious poison, but one of the most harmful. In whatever form it is used, it tells upon the Constitution." Doctors publicly ridiculed her. They said smoking tobacco cleaned the lungs and whiskey cured almost every disease. History proved who was right. What impresses me most is that Ellen White described exactly how addictions work in the brain. Without knowing anything about dopamine, neural receptors or neurotransmitters, she explained that these substances create an unnatural appetite that becomes stronger over time until it completely controls the will. Let me tell you the story of Miguel Rodriguez, an Adventist pastor who for 20 years secretly struggled with an addiction that almost destroyed his ministry. He had started smoking socially in college before becoming an Adventist. When he was baptized, he thought his willpower would be enough to quit. Miguel confessed to me through tears that he had tried to quit tobacco more than 50 times. He had tried patches, gum, hypnosis, expensive therapies. Nothing worked permanently. He felt like a spiritual failure, a hypocrite, preaching health while secretly destroying his body. The guilt was slowly killing him. One day, desperate, Miguel began studying exactly what Ellen White wrote about addictions. Not just the warnings, but the specific methods she recommended for liberation. He applied every principle to the letter for 90 days. The results were supernatural. Ellen White taught that liberation from addictions requires 3 simultaneous elements: intense prayer at dawn, vigorous physical exercise in the day, open air, and completely natural nutrition without refined sugars or stimulants. Miguel followed this protocol with military discipline. Modern neuroscience confirms that this specific combination, exactly as Ellen White described it, restores dopamine receptors damaged by addictions. Morning exercise generates natural endorphins, clean nutrition stabilizes brain glucose, and prayer activates brain areas associated with self-regulation. Miguel has now been free from all addictions for 8 years. Not just tobacco, but also caffeine, refined sugar, and other stimulants he didn't know had enslaved him. His ministry was transformed because he now preaches with the authority of someone who knows the liberating power of Ellen White's principles. Researchers at Mayo Clinic have documented that recovery programs based on Ellen White's principles, prayer, exercise, natural nutrition, and spiritual community, have success rates of 85% compared to 15% of traditional secular programs. Once again, the prophetess had the answers before the problem existed. Now I want you to close your eyes for a moment and imagine with me, what would have happened if Ellen White had never received these visions? How many lives would have been lost? How much suffering would have been avoided if the world had listened to her warnings from the beginning? Let me tell you about the Gutierrez family from Guadalajara, Mexico. 5 generations of Adventists who have faithfully applied every principle that Ellen White taught. Grandmother Maria Elena is 96 years old, walks without a cane, has a clearer mind than many young people, and has never taken a medication in her life. Her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren follow the same pattern. They rise at dawn to pray, eat fruits and vegetables from their own garden, rest completely on Sabbaths, exercise in the open air, and have never tasted alcohol, tobacco, or drugs. The result is an extraordinary family that defies all medical logic. When doctors study the Gutierrez family, they cannot scientifically explain why they have longer telomeres, stronger immune systems, and brains that function like precision machines after so many years. But we know the answer. They followed the instructions God gave to Ellen White. But it's not just one family. It's millions of Adventists around the world living similar testimonies. In Barbados, Japan, Italy, the United States, and Mexico, wherever Adventists faithfully apply Ellen White's principles, Science finds extraordinarily healthy and long-lived populations. I'm going to confess something that changed my life forever. When I began researching these topics, I was skeptical about the gift of prophecy. I thought they were common-sense advice disguised as divine revelation. But when I saw the scientific evidence, my faith was completely transformed. We're not talking about coincidences. We're talking about knowledge that was impossible for the time. Ellen White described viruses and bacteria when scientists believed in bad air theory. She spoke about vitamins decades before their discovery. She explained the mind-body connection when medicine considered them completely separate. Every time I read a new scientific study that confirms something Ellen White wrote over 150 years ago, I feel chills throughout my body. It's as if God is whispering to me, "Now do you believe I speak through my prophets?" The answer comes from my soul. "Yes, Lord, now I believe." Brother, sister, if you've ever doubted whether God can really speak to his children in these modern times, if you've wondered whether the gift of prophecy is real or imaginary, the evidence you've just heard should convince even the most skeptical heart. Ellen White wasn't just an intelligent woman with good advice. She was a true prophetess sent by God to prepare us for the challenges of the 21st century. Every word she wrote under divine inspiration is being validated by the most advanced science in the world. Glory to God for the gift of prophecy. Now comes the most important part of this entire message. How are you going to apply these 5 prophetic alerts in your daily life? I don't want this knowledge to just stay in your mind. I want it to completely transform your physical, mental, and spiritual reality in the next 30 days. Let's create together your 30-day prophetic action plan. Starting tomorrow, you're going to implement 1 prophetic alert each week until you complete all 5. By the end of the month, your life will be so different that people will ask you what happened to you. First week, mental spiritual alert. Wake up 30 minutes earlier than your normal schedule to pray and meditate. Outdoors. If you live in the city, find a park, a rooftop, or simply open your window. Ellen White said the first hours of the day are sacred for connecting with God. During this first week, spend 15 minutes singing hymns out loud. It doesn't matter if you don't sing well. What matters is that you release those natural endorphins God designed to heal your mind. You'll notice changes in your mood from the 3rd day. Anxiety will begin to disappear. Second week. Nutritional alert. Completely eliminate red meat and processed foods from your diet. Have an abundant breakfast with fruits and whole grains. A substantial lunch with vegetables and legumes. A light dinner before 6 in the evening. Drink only pure water between meals. During this second week, practice intermittent fasting exactly as Ellen White taught it. At least 5 hours between meals, without snacks or sugary drinks. Your digestion will transform, your energy will increase, and you'll begin to lose weight. Naturally, without extreme diets. Third week, rest alert. Commit to keeping the Sabbath completely from Friday evening to Saturday evening. Turn off all electronic devices, walk in nature, strengthen your family relationships, and dedicate extra time to deep prayer. During this third week, establish a fixed schedule for sleeping and waking. Ellen White recommended going to bed before 10 at night and rising before 6 in the morning. Your nervous system will regulate completely and you'll experience the most restorative sleep of your life. Fourth week, natural exercise alert. Walk outdoors for 1 hour each morning, preferably in places with trees and plants. If possible, start a home garden or work with your hands on useful projects. Avoid indoor gyms and seek physical activities in contact with nature. During this fourth week, combine exercise with worship. Walk while praying, work while singing, exercise while meditating on scripture. Ellen White taught that when body and spirit exercise together, the results are supernatural. Upon completing these 4 weeks, you'll have established the foundations of a prophetic life. Then the fifth week will be to evaluate your progress, adjust whatever is necessary, and commit to living permanently according to these principles that God revealed to Ellen White for your total well-being. We've reached the end of this extraordinary journey, but we're really just beginning. Everything you've heard today isn't simply health advice or scientific curiosities. These are divine instructions for you to live the abundant life that Jesus promised in John chapter 10, verse 10. Ellen White wrote a promise I want you to engrave in your heart forever. Those who put their trust in God and obey His laws will live and not die. They will have health and peace and will see good days upon the earth. This isn't a promise just for heaven. It's a promise for your life here and now. I'm going to confess something that moves me to tears. Every time I see an Adventist faithfully applying these prophetic principles, I see a glimpse of Eden restored. I see how God wanted us to live from the beginning, with perfect health, mental peace, clear purpose, and constant divine connection. Your future can be radically different starting right now. You no longer have to live sick when God gave you instructions for perfect health. You no longer have to live anxious when the Creator revealed to you the secrets of mental peace. You no longer have to live without purpose when you have a prophetic mission to fulfill. The next 7 days are going to be the most important of your life. You're going to decide whether these 5 prophetic alerts remain as interesting information in your memory or become the foundation of a supernatural transformation that will impact your family, your church, and your community. Imagine for a moment what your life will be like a year from now if you faithfully apply these principles. Imagine waking up each morning with radiant energy, clear mind, peaceful heart, and absolute certainty that you're living exactly as God designed you to live. But there's something bigger than your personal transformation. When you begin living according to these prophetic alerts, you'll become a living testimony of God's power. People will ask you why you're different. And there, you'll have the perfect opportunity to tell them about Ellen White and the gift of prophecy. I want to challenge you to something specific. During the next 30 days, document every change you experience applying these principles. Take photos, write in a journal, measure your energy levels. At the end of the month, you'll have personal evidence of prophetic power that will strengthen your faith for life. Ellen White wrote these words, "I want to be your commitment prayer. Lord, take my life and use it completely for your glory. May my body be a temple of the Holy Spirit. May my mind reflect your wisdom, and may my testimony draw others to you." The next message in this series will reveal something even more impactful: how Ellen White specifically prophesied about the final events of human history and how modern science is confirming that her predictions are being fulfilled exactly as she saw them. You can't miss it because your preparation for the future depends on it.